Welcome back to A Plus Parents, everyone. And I have a special guest with me today. I mean, super special, super cool. I'm gonna go on the edge of saying world renowned. I mean, that's kind of the guy that we're going to be hanging with today. I'm going to introduce you to Jonathan Fanning, and I got to meet Jonathan at a convention that was for a personalized learning students. So similar to the way we work with our homeschoolers, but this is some student populations that we work with in California. And Jonathan was the keynote for the entire event. So I got to sit in on a few of his talks, and he's just a lot of fun. Very knowledgeable. And when I asked him about coming on the podcast, he said, absolutely, because he has a special place in his heart for homeschoolers. And I'm going to tell you a little more about what he does so you can find out more. But first of all, Jonathan, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for making your day work to be here. I know you got a lot going on, so I appreciate you taking time to be here and saying hey to everybody.
Oh, yeah, no, it's great to be here. You know, when you and I met, within a few minutes, I thought, I think I've met this guy before, because I think we look around in life looking for people who see the world bigger and try to make a splash that's worth making. And within a few minutes of talking to him, I thought, this is the guy. We need.
Yeah, you were right away. I was like, I like this guy, That was very cool. So, as we were kind of getting ready and we're talking a little bit, you have a really interesting background because you had a double major in college. So you have a mechanical engineering degree, a business degree, and you've worked for some pretty big companies. And you even said, you were the non-entrepreneurial kind of student. You were that, toe the line, make good grades, and right.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
How did you get interested in what made you think like engineering and business together? Was there something that you knew you wanted, or how'd that happen?
That's a really good question. I was very fortunate. My mother forced me when I was a freshman. She forced me to tag along with a doctor for around 6 weeks. My mother was involved in career planning in colleges, and she said, you have to do a work study with a doctor. And I thought, no, I'm just going to be a doctor because doctors get paid well. And I was good at math and science. So I thought, there you go. Like something I get paid well. And, and my grandmother used to joke around with us that we need to doctor in the family. I'll do it. I'm in, and within a few months of my freshman year in college, my mother says, go follow this doctor around for 6 weeks, and 2 or 3 weeks into it, I thought, I hate everything that I've done so far, and doctor. And this is, I spend my life looking for game changers, kind of wake up calls, things that force you to step out and say, wait a second, what are we doing? And the doctor, we're driving back from the hospital to one of his offices. He had a practice with 2 offices that he owned. And he says, and he knew, I think he knew, he says, a lot of people pick medicine because they think it pays well, and they happen to be good at the stuff, the math, the science. And he says, you can make money doing anything. I'm 18 years old, and I'm sitting in his Saab driving through. I remember where we were. It was a sunny day. It was early December, but a warmer day. And I remember just staring at something and saying, no, can you make money doing anything? And it hit me. And he said, if you pick a career, a profession that you don't jump out of bed to do every day, it will feel like a very, very, very long and frustrating life. And I thought, wow, and he didn't look at me when he said this, but I think he was, like a good doctor. He was stepping back and analyzing the patient. And then I said, I want to do something else. I don't know what. No, I have no idea. But shifted to engineering, but I almost never did engineering. I got involved in speaking and coaching people in turnarounds almost immediately after college. Just loved the game of it, the challenge of, can you change something?
Wow, that's amazing. What's really great is that you think back to when that was, right? So when you were 18, 2-3 years ago, right? So but, something that I'm noticing in education today, and it's a new trend, and I love it, is that we actually take the time to ask kids what they love to do. And when I was growing up, that was not the way it was. It was like, there's what you love to do, and that won't be your day job. That's what you love to do. That'll be a hobby. That'll be whatever it was. And it's interesting now because we really are asking young people, well, what do you love to do? And then how can you turn that into a career path, or how can you turn that into the way that you support your family? You know, like there's all of those, it's just, I love seeing it. And I love that more people are doing it, and it's becoming more of a norm about asking young people, what are you interested in? And you know, what do you really love to do? And how can you turn that into something that's a career path for you? So I'm so glad that someone did that for you when you're at a young age. That's cool.
Yeah. But Dennis, I mean, one of the problems that I had is I didn't do much with it. I changed my major to something else that was math and science, and I thought you'd make money doing, you know, and it was fast forward a few more years, and I was helping companies turn around, big companies, usually Fortune 100, you know, biggest 100 companies on the planet. And I was in a car accident. That was a wake-up call. You know, it was a warm day, cold night, black ice. I know you don't get that where you are right now.
No. Like black ice.
Yeah, I did a keynote in Hawaii a few years ago, and I was telling them about black ice, and they just looked at me like, black ice, what, you know. But you know, it was a warm day, cold night, black ice, car starts sliding, 2 tractor trailers on the highway just plowed through my car.
Wow.
And you know, we all survived. My brother was in the car, and he had to be helicoptered to work on his brain. And, you know, today you wouldn't even know it happened. No, we don't tell them that. We're like, how you doing? How you doing? But it was a wake-up call. And it got me to step back and say, what, like, you know, are you really, if you get a redo at life, like that could have easily, because one of the trucks hit my door. I watched it hit my door. I leaned away. And it was one of those moments where I thought, like, if this was the last year of my life, would I be thrilled with how I invested it, how I spent it? You know, and I started to look at different questions, you know, and I started to look at biographies of people and say, like, you know, that guy didn't seem to hate his life, you know, and I'd see that over and over and over again. Like Steve Jobs didn't hate going to work, you know, and I mean, all these people that are like so into what they do, and I wasn't. You know, I wasn't, and I made this little model. It took a while, but I made this little model of I call it TPS. It's like, how can I overlap my talents and my passions with some good way to serve the world? You know, talents and passions, things I'm good at, but things I actually like doing. You know, and in my, when I do entrepreneur camps now with a lot of teenagers and younger and older, and that's part of the process. We have them think about, like, if, like that doctor said, if you could get paid, if you could make money doing anything, what's something you're good at and you love doing? You know, when you do it, you could do it for 10 hours and you're like, let's do more. You know, can we do that again? That was great. You know, you're not like, oh, tomorrow I have to get up. I don't eat in the restaurant that says, thank God it's not Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. You know that restaurant.
Right. Yeah.
Don't go there. I won't eat there because I don't like the concept of, like, don't be happy with the way you're investing or spending your life. I hate the concept, you know, and that accident, you know, I sometimes I share that story in one of my books, in Who Are You Becoming? I share that story, you know, and in the audio version, people are like, Jonathan, there's a lot to that. Like, there's a lot of emotion because they made me go in the studio and record it. And I didn't want that to happen. Right. But I needed I call it a frying pan moment. Like, I needed to be hit over the head with the frying pan with, what are you doing? Are you going to do this for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years? You know, I was successful. I had good title, great income, great travel. I was flying on corporate jets. That company, you know, like I'd pull up 10 minutes before the flight was leaving the corporate airport and fly around the world, you know, to visit these big companies. And I was miserable, you know, I was miserable. I thought, maybe I need to change something. And, you know, there's a little piece of it.
Oh, wow. And so you start with, so there's SPO, right? Which is your, say again, I know passions and.
I said I have to overlap my talents, my passions.
That's it.
TPS. I said I have to find some overlap. And I'm not the first person to do this.
Yeah.
You know, people forever have said, like, what do I love to do and who do I love to help and how do I love to help them, right? And you know, and that's the reason I run entrepreneur camps for teenagers today. It's one of it's also the reason I work with leadership teams, but not within the structure. Quite often people say, Jonathan, like, you helped me figure out how to be a better dad or mom.
Hmm.
And you could tell just the way I say it that matters to me. You know, it's like, yeah, I didn't just help you make more money for the company, you know, and not that doesn't matter, but if the passion and the way to, like, if something worthwhile to serve aren't there, you know, and that's what I needed. I needed that kind of overlap. And I think most people do. In the entrepreneur camp we run, we spend a lot of time in that. Like, what's something that really bothers you about the world around you that, like, if you could make an impact there, you would be thrilled.
Wow. Well, we're going to talk more about the entrepreneur camps, because I know people are like, okay, wait a minute, where are you doing those? How do I get involved? So we'll give people, you'll have access to your website and your show notes and the books you've written. But I know, you know, being a math and science guy, right? It's kind of funny because in your books, you create a lot of formulas, right? And so formulas for living life, formulas for success, formulas for, you know, all the formulas for leadership, formulas for entrepreneurship. And I know in one of your books, you have the S plus R equals O formula, right? And it was so great because my assistant was reading, you know, she when you gave me your book, she took it from me and she goes, I'm reading this before you. And I was like, okay, fine. So she has it. So she said, I said, well, what did you love about it? She goes, I love this formula. She goes, it actually had me stop what I was doing and had me start to be around people differently. She's working on a course for us as well. And she looked at the course like it was never going to happen. And she kept looking at it from, this is never going to get done. And there was something in your book that completely changed her perspective on it. And now she's looking at how she's going to get it done. And I just like, you know, it's just really great. So tell us about that formula. What is it? So it's S plus R equals O. Am I saying that right?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. S plus R equals O. S plus R equals O. The O is the outcome that you're looking for, right? And the S is the situation, the story, the stuff, the scenario. You could use a lot of other words for the S. But then the R is I call it the piece where you and I, we happen to the world. You know, the R is how you respond to that stuff. You know, and I had a teacher when I was in 7th grade, and this is, I think, one of the reasons I love the concept of teaching. Most people don't remember much from school or learning when they were 12 or 13. This teacher, though, she would, I mean, one day she gets up in class and she does a dance. She said, you know, we're going to learn about how living things are classified. And she starts dancing and she says, and she's moving with it. And she's singing kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. And she's doing this crazy dance. And, you know, we're staring at her like, yeah, okay, all right. You know, and then she stops and she just gets this crazy look. And she says, oh, we should do the dance together. Stand up with me. You know, and we're 12 years old. You know, we're looking around like, you know, the person next to me says, pretend you don't see her. You know, don't contact with the woman. but she slowly gets us to stand up, and she says, you know, oh, I know. If you want to use a prop, you can use a prop. So we're picking up things at that point, and we're like hitting the table with stuff, you know, kingdom, phylum, and we're doing the dance a little, and eventually we're really into it. And then she takes requests. She's like, you know, you want me to do it like Michael Jackson? You know, kingdom, you know, like, and then she stops again, crazy look in her eyes. And she says, let's do it as a Congo line around the classroom. You know, and we just did, you know, and I tell that story because 2 weeks later or so, there was a test, name the classification of living things. You could tell in the class, you could tell when people were at that question because they were humming. They were going, Nobody got it wrong. Nobody got it wrong.
Wow.
Teacher, she understood situation, right? Situation, scenario stuff, or students plus her response to it equals the outcome. She never said, you know, if the kids weren't so distracted. She never said if the budget were different, then I could impact these kids. She never said, you know, if I didn't have to work with so-and-so, if I didn't have these kids right after lunchtime, you know, if their parents were more involved in the education experience. She never said things like that. She the R, you know, she owned the happen to the world. And, you know, I challenge people all the time. And I mean, honestly, when I speak and when I write, my wife says, Jonathan, like, you're holding up a mirror to yourself, you know, because I'm talking to me, like, I'm not world class at happening to the world, you know, but I challenge people to pick one relationship, you know, your friendship with somebody that you've known for years, but maybe it's not what it could be. And say, you know, if I wanted to make that relationship deeper and stronger and more meaningful, maybe more fun, you know, maybe more memorable experiences together. And let's pretend it's 100% up to just you, right? And me at the mirror, it's just me. If I just assume they're not going to do anything differently. And right, for most people in our lives, we can assume that, can't we? You know,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, Thanksgiving's coming up and you say, I want it to be an amazing experience. I want that, you know, whatever that is, if you have dinner or whatever it is, you know, or the weekend, you know, we're going into a weekend. It's Thursday when we're talking. It's going into a weekend. The weekend will be what it will be. Or if I take this approach and say, you know, I want to make this a really, I don't know, really meaningful or really special or really fun. I just want to have a really fun Saturday morning with the family.
Hmm.
You say like, okay, situation stuff, you know, scenario, story, but how can I own the R in there? Maybe just a little more than I usually do, you know, and maybe it's, you know what I could do? I could get up a little early and I could make some kind of different meal, or maybe I could have a question that I'm asking to the people in the morning, you know, or maybe I can just, before I start down the conversation that always happens, I could just look at one of my kids and say, you know, it was really nice to spend time with you this week. You know, and it's a game changer, you know, and you don't see, the thing is, I love looking for game changers. Most of the time, they're not big things. They're usually little tiny things that we actually finally do something with. You know, we put it into our life, not every day, but for Saturday morning. Maybe it's just, I'm going to happen to Saturday morning this weekend. You know, maybe it's a dinner with a friend, and maybe it's you're texting with somebody you know, and you say, how can I make their day? You know, like, what's one thing I could say that you know, maybe it's some quote you read and you say, hey, this made me think of you because you do that for me.
Hmm.
You've just
I love
happened
that.
to the world, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I'm going with stuff. Like my S is going to be stuff, because there's always stuff going on, right? And then there's how am I going to respond to the stuff? And that will impact my outcome. I love that. I think it's great. Now, what people don't know or may not know about you that I found out about you is that you are a professional speaker, and you won an award as a TED Talk speaker. So first of all, how do you even get on to be a TED Talk speaker? And then how do you, and you won the award, you were the best speaker of the day. That's super cool. But tell us a little bit about the experience of what you did to become a TED Talk speaker. Because I know people listening right now, the families are listening, and as they're listening, if their young people are not there in the room right now, they're going to be listening to the recording of this. So I know that's going to happen because people are like, oh, I would love to be, do a TED Talk, right? So tell us a little bit about the process and how that happened for you. And
Sure.
Yeah, it was a great story, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, Steve Jobs did a keynote at Stanford, and he said that connecting the dots looking backwards in life is a lot easier than in the moments.
Right.
Yeah. But, really, years ago, I decided I wanted to be able to speak. You know, I saw somebody speak and I thought that was great. I love the way they did this. But I didn't think you could make a living doing it. You know, and I had never gotten close enough to someone that was making a living doing it to think was possible. You know, but I always thought that's neat to be able to tell a story, to be able to, to be able to ask a question, to be able to move an audience. And then eventually I was at a talk somewhere, and the guy speaking, he was signing books and I went and talked to him, and I said, what do you do for a living? And he said, this, what do you mean? So wait, you just talk for a living? He said, well, I mean, I write books too, but I talk and I write books. He said, I do a lot of thinking, so I could do the interesting. And it started to open up my mind. So how do you get booked as a TED speaker? I went on this, you could call it a binge, where I said, I will speak for as many live audiences as I possibly can, and try to practice telling stories and asking questions and using quotes. And, using voice and volume and changes. I'll study speakers and I'll try to do it as much as I can with some feedback loop. And I got contracted by a company to do full day seminars 5 days a week all over the country. And I made almost no money doing that.
Mm.
You try to talk in front of a group for 6 hours, 5 days in a row, and either you get better at it or maybe it's just not your thing.
Right.
There's
it's kind of like tooling around with the doctor. It's like, yeah, this isn't my gig, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's, go backwards in our conversation. We were talking about the talent, passion and the way to serve. If it's not in your talent and passion area, you're dying doing that.
Right.
People at almost everywhere I speak, I get people that come up to me, when I'm signing books or whatever after a talk, and they say, Jonathan, I want to do what you do. And I kind of smile and I say, do you want to do what I did? Because that was not that much fun, traveling around I'd be gone for a week speaking, and just in West Virginia and in Idaho, and I've spoken in 49 states now, on 3 continents. But in the early stages, sometimes it was great and sometimes it wasn't. And I'd pick a story and I'd work on that story. I read that Martin Luther King Jr., when he gave the I Have a Dream component, August 28, 1963 in Washington, he says, I have a dream that one day, right? He used that little piece of that speech about 130 times with live audiences before that day. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't like you know what, that'd be a good way to say this. He knew the time to pause in there. He knew the way to create cadence. And so how do you get booked as a TED speaker is your question, right?
Yeah, but you're leading right up to it. So you said something that's really impactful. When people say, I want to do what you do, because it really isn't what you do. It's what you did to get you there. And I love that. It's huge, right? So that in itself is a game changer. But yes, so how do you get booked as a TED Talk speaker?
Yeah, so I eventually became very intentional with what audiences I would speak for, and I would go out of my way to speak for audiences that had decision makers in them. I'd speak at big conferences where there were CEOs of companies there. Speak early on, I'd speak at Rotaries, because Rotaries are sort of the local version of that, and they need a speaker every single week. Right. Every Rotary around the world. So if you contact 20 Rotaries near you and you figure out a talk, they don't let you talk for long, 15 minutes. But if you're trying to hone a talk, write down, here's a talk I think would work, something I'd love to talk about. I think people would impact people, and you could go talk at a Rotary and practice and get feedback. I would definitely record it first if you've never done this much. But I started speaking intentionally in front of groups that had influencers, that had decision makers. And the TED Talk was not, I didn't intentionally go out of my way to find it. Somebody in one of my talks said, Jonathan, we're putting together a TED Talk on this big military base. And one of their high level, I don't even know the title of the woman, lieutenant colonel maybe. She was in the audience at one of your talks. She said you were the best speaker she's ever heard. They want to know if you'll be, one of the speakers at the TED conference. So, I went out of my way to make sure I'm not good, and that's, it's one thing to be good at speaking. It's another thing to be good at speaking when you wake up with a headache, or right. When you wake up with a stomach bug. Or when your flight was canceled and you have to drive from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, 13 hours to Chicago, get to Chicago at 5 a.m., get on a plane at 6:30 and fly to Columbus, Ohio, and get picked up at the airport and driven to the keynote. They put the microphone on as you're walking in for a 9 a.m. keynote. And right? That's different. That's different. And for them to say that was the best keynote we've ever had, can you speak again here next year when you haven't slept and you drove through 9 hours of hurricane rain through South Dakota and towards Chicago, but it was, you could very intentionally get in front of people thinking about booking TED conferences. I just intentionally got in front of people who make decisions. Who
Wow.
come up to decisions and come and speak for our hospital. NYU Medical Center, great example. They have me come and do work with their leadership team almost every year. And I spoke at a conference where I knew the decision makers in healthcare on the East Coast would be there. And one of their people said, do you do stuff with companies too? I said, sure, let's talk. So, yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. You get in action and you're doing what you love to do and things happen. It's just yeah, that's so great. All right. So let's take a look at your entrepreneurial camps for young people. So you work with teens and you work with homeschoolers, you work with people in the public schools. So you've had a chance to work with all kinds of students. And I know we were hinting at it's possible about seeing this online here in the near future, but right now people come to you and you're in New Jersey, New York.
I'm in New York.
In New York. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what happens at one of the events, and then I think you and I we're going to play. We're going to figure out how to do this online. I think it'd be awesome, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So it was more than a dozen years ago. This idea was in the back of my head of how do you teach kids what it's like to start and own a business? And I was working with leaders all over the world at that time. And I thought, like, what are some of the biggest lessons? And I started asking sometimes CEOs of companies, founders of companies. I had a bunch of small business clients that were, not small, not tiny, but, let's say $20 to $100 million businesses. And I was working with the owners, the founders of those companies. And I started asking a lot of people the question, like, what are some of the things that you needed to learn, some of the aha moments in starting a business and in being responsible for something at a higher level. And so often it was an experience that kind of woke me up or like I talked about the car accident, like something that pulled me out of my view of the world. And maybe it forced me to see the world differently, or it allowed me or facilitated me seeing the world differently. And I kept thinking, like, I wish you could give this to a kid. I wish you could give this gift of, it's going to happen to you when you're in your 30s or 40s, but why can't somehow we facilitate you getting that when you're 12? Or like when me being miserable in work.
Right.
You could tell a kid, like a 12-year-old, you could say, look, you're probably going to be miserable in work. Only 80 to 90% of the planet is relatively miserable at what they do for a living.
Right. Yeah.
But I thought, well, you need to give them an experience, not just a textbook, and it was the idea of this thing. And I started playing with it, and I started finding people that saw this and understood how to do this. And we started the first camp we did with, actually the first one we ever did was all homeschoolers. And at that point, I didn't know that much about the homeschool world. And I was so impressed with just the type of people, the willingness to think differently. And one of the challenges we did in that the very first week, experience, right? An experience that has the potential to just change the way somebody sees the world. We gave them 1 hour to make enough money to buy their own lunch that day. The person running it with me and we sat down and we said, we want to give them something to do where there's like real consequences. So we said, here's the deal. It was Thursday. We said, here's the deal. We think you're getting a lot out of this. We're not sure. So we're going to give you an hour. We let them form little teams. Most of the teams were 3, 4, 5 kids together. We said, you have an hour to make money, and whatever money you make buys your lunch today. And immediately a few of the kids are looking at us like, wait a second. I thought lunch was included in the program. Right. Like we're like, no, today your revenue. And the kids are just like blown away by this idea. Like we're supposed to make money somehow in an hour, And we've done it many times, versions of that with now hundreds and hundreds of kids, some version of that. And usually it's a very fixed small amount of time, an hour or so. Because what you see happen is there's a little bit of what? Okay, we only have 48 minutes left. All right. There's probably a way to do it. And they eventually sit down, let's say it's 5 kids, and they sit down and say, we need $8 each to buy lunch. So 5 of us times 8, $40. We need to make $40 and we have 35 minutes left. And then they figure something out. They figure some way to, they'll figure stuff that they have in their world that they could sell. They'll figure out services. A lot of times they'll figure out a service that's not going to be provided by them or delivered by them. For example, they'll ask, I have an aunt who's an attorney, and she could use this kind of stuff done. And you know what, if it's, let's say it's web development, we can't do it. But if we find her somebody who's really good and we arrange a sales, a profit, a commission on that, and they'll make the money, and at the end they go, we did it, and they're so excited. And every time I've ever done this, they said it was easier than we ever thought to make that money out of thin air, out of nothing. And we set our goal way too low.
Wow.
We set and you think like that's, I had a kid who now he's in graduate school at Columbia University, going for his MBA. And he was in the camp early on. And he told me recently, he said, Jonathan, that little 1 hour thing, he said, that changed the way I approach almost everything I do in my life. He said, I decided when I was in high school, because of that, he's a homeschool kid. He said, I decided if I went to college, somebody else was going to pay for it, all of it. And he said, so I started looking for that. And then he said, I decided if I was going to get a master's degree, same thing, except I was going to get paid at the same time. I want to finish school and owe someone money. And he said, it just came from that 1 hour of you're making up limits in your life. You're making up restrictions that aren't really there. There's the potential. It is bigger than you and I almost ever think. And that's what I wanted with this camp. That's what I wanted. I wanted in a few days, in a week, let's say, because some of them were 5 days, kind of immersive. I wanted them to get things that have the potential to alter the way they see the world and their role. More than a year or two of normal life does. And it's been a blast. It's been a blast.
That's huge. Oh my gosh. And it's those things. It's like your 7th grade class and the teacher doing the dance, right?
Yeah.
It's young people coming to an event like that, and that 1 hour. And I love that for them, it was what they realized out of it. We were all done. First, they didn't think they could do it. And then once they realized they could do it, they realized that their goal was too low. They could have made more money. So that's so impressive.
Yeah.
All right. So
right now we're doing a camp right now with a group of homeschoolers, all homeschoolers, and it's once a week, 2 hours once a week. And I give them a challenge in between. This one girl, she's beaten every, she's killing, she's mopping the floor with the field, with the rest of the kids in the camp. I give them a challenge of, let's figure out something that talent, passion, and serve overlap. Let's figure out something you're good at and you like to do, and some way you can make money doing that. And she really likes making kind of unique, I don't know if you'd call it, I guess, desserts, treats that you can serve at, especially at holiday events, but family gatherings. And she's like, I've always liked making these things, and we're like, well, could you put a business together with that? And this is week 1, right? This is the first, I've never met them before, first 2 hours. And that's not the only part of the day. That's only like a half an hour of the day. We're like, let's figure out, like, how much money could you make in a week where you'd say, wow, where you'd say like, that's, oh. And they're all doing this together, and they're all kind of challenging each other. And then at the end, she has some number, right? And then she says, that's a good number. And I looked at her and I said, Miriam, I think you'll double that number. And she goes, should I write down double the number? And she does, and then a week later, she did slightly more than double the number.
Wow.
And I have them kind of report, like, what'd you do? What'd your week look like? Monday I did this, just tiny little sketch notes. And she puts her number on the wall, and the other kids are like, what? Because it's a bigger number than they've thought about making in their, and then I said, well, should we do round two? And I love asking that, because then I'm not telling them we're doing round two. They're telling me, could we do round two? Like, we want to,
Right.
And they do every time I've ever done it. Don't tell your kids this if we're going to do it. But we're like, should we do a rematch? And they all say, yeah, I got to beat, and she beat them the next week as well. And it's a great time. Great time.
Wow. That's amazing. All right. Well, we're going to get people on your website and finding out about the books you've written, your speaking dates and tours and all the things you do. And there's also your TED Talk is online, right? So if they go to your website, they can see the TED Talk as well. So it's just so great. Oh my gosh, we got to get back together for sure. So I hope you're okay with that, because I know there's more to come. We could keep doing this. So it's really, really great. Jonathan, thank you so much. And for people that are trying to get to the site right now and you don't see it in the show notes, it's www.jonathanfanning, and it's kind of like Manning, the football player, but with an F. So Fanning, jonathanfanning.com. You can check out the things he's got online already, find out more about the entrepreneur camps. We're going to be back again because we're going to talk more about this. I just think it's just such a treat for young people to be able to be engaged in something like this. So great. Jonathan, thank you again for making your time work to be here today. And we'll do this again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for the chance to be together. Yeah, I appreciate what you're doing here.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. See you next time on A+ Parents.